In the modern global economy, few trades are as hidden, yet disturbingly profitable as the international commerce in cruelty tools. Beneath the polished surfaces of defense, expos, and national security briefings lies a dark and thriving industry, one built on the design, production, and export of tools specifically created to inflict pain, exert control, and silence dissent. These tools range from the blunt and visible, such as rubber bullets, tear gas, canisters, shackles, batons, and restraint chairs, to the silent and digital, including facial recognition software, spyware, and predictive policing platforms. While manufacturers and governments often refer to these items as non-lethal weapons, compliance technologies, or crowd control solutions, their real-world application tells a far grimmer story. Stun guns have been used to extract confessions. Restraint chairs have caused deaths in custody. Tear gas has been fired into enclosed spaces, suffocating protesters. Surveillance tools have helped track down and imprison political dissidents, sometimes leading directly to torture or execution. The global trade in such instruments is massive, yet remains largely opaque. In part, this is due to the deliberate blurring of lines between legitimate law enforcement needs and outright repression. Many of these tools are dual-use, designed for policing but frequently used for punishment. The companies that produce them are often integrated into larger defense or tech conglomerates, shielded by legal ambiguity and supported by state actors. Countries that publicly endorse human rights may still grant export licenses to regimes notorious for abuse. This industry exists not in violation of international law, but within its gaps. Treaties, such as the United Nations Convention Against Torture, prohibit inhumane treatment, but provide limited guidance on the tools used to perpetrate it. National export regulations vary dramatically in stringency and enforcement. As a result, the same restraint chair banned in one jurisdiction may be legally sold in another. Items often change hands multiple times through brokers, shell companies, or foreign subsidiaries, leaving a trail nearly impossible to trace. What's even more alarming is the normalization of this trade. International arms expos such as France Eurosatory, DSEI UK, and China Police Expo regularly feature booths dedicated to selling these products, where buyers from both democratic and authoritarian states browse instruments of control like consumers at a tech fair. There is little oversight and even less accountability. This book seeks to unmask the global economy of pain, who manufactures these tools, who profits, who suffers, and what can be done to stop it. It explores how legal systems, corporate interests, and political calculations have enabled a market where cruelty is commodified and exported. At the heart of it lies a simple, disturbing truth. Pain sells. ***************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** roots of the global trade in cruelty tools stretch deep into history, tracing back to the brutal mechanisms of control employed by colonial empires. During the age of imperial conquest and slavery, European powers systematically developed and deployed a range of physical restraints and instruments of torture, designed to dominate and subjugate entire populations. Whips were used to enforce labor on plantations. Stocks and pillories publicly humiliated those who resisted. Iron shackles and chains bound enslaved individuals and prisoners alike. These crude but effective devices formed the earliest toolkits of institutionalized oppression, thought moving into the 19th and early 20th centuries. The expansion of industrial manufacturing revolutionized the production of such tools. Cast iron stocks were replaced with forged steel restraints, and hand-forged chains gave way to mass-produced shackles and leg irons. The apparatus of torture evolved in sophistication alongside the technology of mass production, creating devices that could be distributed on an unprecedented scale. Colonial powers established factories dedicated to producing these implements, embedding cruelty within the emerging global supply chains of empire. The 20th century saw a significant transformation in both the form and function of cruelty tools. During periods of intense political repression, particularly under authoritarian regimes and military dictatorships, new devices and techniques emerged, many reflecting advances in electrical engineering and psychology. Electric shock machines became instruments not only of punishment but of coercion and psychological trauma. In Latin America's dirty wars, for example, electric prods and stun batons were commonly used to extract confessions or to punish perceived enemies of the state. Simultaneously, intelligence agencies and secret police forces developed psychological torture, methods ranging from sensory deprivation to manipulation, with sound and light that complemented physical devices. These tactics were often covertly supported by Western governments during the Cold War, which viewed repression as a tool in geopolitical contests. Today's cruelty tools are the direct descendants of this history. Traditional implements like shackles and batons remain in circulation, but are now supplemented and enhanced by modern materials, ergonomic designs, and integration with digital technologies. Manufacturing has shifted from localized colonial workshops to multinational corporations. and state-owned enterprises operating complex, militarized production lines. Raw materials and components are sourced globally, assembled in factories in Asia, Europe, and the Americas, and distributed through intricate international trade networks. This historical lineage underscores how cruelty has been industrialized and globalized. The trade in torture tools is not a recent anomaly but a continuation of centuries of systemic violence, now packaged under the guise of security and order. Understanding this lineage is crucial to dismantling the structures that allow such a trade to persist unchecked today. Chapter 3. Who makes these tools, from state-owned factories to private defense giants? Today's cruelty tools are made by a mix of manufacturers. State-owned firms like Norinco, China, mass-produce stun guns and batons. Private U.S. corporations, such as Safariland, CTS, and Axon, formerly Taser International, sell riot control weapons, rubber bullets, and TASERS. European companies in Germany, France, and the Czech Republic have exported handcuffs, shackles, and restraint chairs to authoritarian regimes. These products are often advertised as non-lethal solutions, but in practice, they can cause lasting harm or even death. Chapter 4. Marketing the unmarketable. How cruelty is sanitized. One of the most disturbing aspects of the international trade in cruelty tools is the way manufacturers and sellers deliberately sanitize and rebrand their products to mask their true purpose. Terms like torture devices or tools of repression rarely appear in marketing materials. Instead, companies use euphemisms such as compliance equipment, defensive technology, non-lethal weapons, or correctional restraint systems to cloak the violent reality behind corporate jargon. This linguistic camouflage is no accident. It serves multiple purposes. It shields manufacturers from public criticism, helps circumvent legal restrictions, and appeals to potential buyers, many of whom come from regimes with poor human rights. Records by framing these devices as essential for maintaining public order and safety. Trade fairs and industry expos play a crucial role in this marketing strategy. Events like Milipol, Paris, Eurosatory, DSEI, in London, and the China Police Expo are global hubs where manufacturers display their latest innovations in crowd control and security technology. These fairs attract a wide array of buyers, including law enforcement agencies from democratic nations and representatives of authoritarian regimes alike. At these exhibitions, the tools of cruelty are presented in sterile, polished booths under banners promising enhanced security, public safety, and law enforcement effectiveness. Product catalogs and brochures rarely depict the grim realities these devices cause. Instead, they feature images of uniformed officers conducting controlled training exercises, often with actors simulating compliance. The real-world consequences in deaths and long-term trauma are omitted entirely. Videos shown at these trade shows focus on the supposed benefits of the technology: rapid crowd dispersal, non-lethal incapacitation, and compliance with minimal physical harm. Yet, reports from human rights organizations and survivors tell a far different story. Restraint chairs, marketed as correctional furniture, have led to suffocation and death in detention centers. Stun guns, sold as safe alternatives to firearms, have caused fatal injuries. Tear gas and rubber bullets, advertised as not lethal, have maimed and killed protesters around the world. Moreover, the marketing gloss extends to the legal domain. Companies often provide extensive documentation claiming compliance with international standards and human rights principles, despite evidence to the contrary. This dual narrative, one for public relations and one for the field, allows them to navigate the murky waters between legality and morality with ease. In essence, the marketing of cruelty tools sanitizes suffering and obscures accountability. By rebranding instruments of pain as security solutions, manufacturers create a market where repression is normalized and ethical concerns are relegated to the shadows. This careful packaging is a vital reason why these tools continue to proliferate globally, fueling cycles of violence under the guise of order. Chapter 5. Government role, approvals, subsidies, and complicity. Governments play a far more active role in the proliferation of torture and crowd control tools than is often acknowledged. They are not mere bystanders but key facilitators. In an industry that profits from repression and human suffering, one of the primary mechanisms through which governments enable this trade is the issuance of export licenses. These licenses authorize the shipment of stun guns, restraint chairs, tear gas, and other non-lethal devices to foreign buyers, often to countries with well-documented records of human rights violations. Despite widespread awareness of abuses, many governments continue to approve these exports, prioritizing economic and strategic interests over human rights concerns. Moreover, security aid programs, notably those managed by the U.S. State Department and other Western institutions, billions of dollars annually into equipping foreign police forces, ostensibly intended to enhance public safety and counterterrorism capabilities. This gear often finds itself in the hands of units that use it for suppressing peaceful protests, detaining political dissidents, or committing torture. The United States, United Kingdom, France, and Germany are among the countries whose security assistance has been linked to such outcomes. Subsidies and government research funding further prop up the industry. Private defense contractors and technology firms developing advanced compliance devices such as next-generation stun weapons or restraint systems frequently receive public funds and tax incentives. This financial support rarely includes robust oversight or conditions restricting misuse. Instead, governments often rationalize their involvement under the banner of national security, economic growth, or maintaining geopolitical alliances. In diplomatic arenas, governments may turn a blind eye or actively suppress scrutiny to protect trade relationships with authoritarian regimes. Confidential agreements and classified export permits shield these transactions from public accountability. The result is a web of complicity that sustains a global market for tools designed to control, intimidate, and torture. Chapter 6. The Digital Dimension. Modern tools of surveillance and control the trade in instruments of cruelty has evolved dramatically in the digital age. Physical tools of repression are increasingly complemented in some cases, supplanted by sophisticated surveillance and psychological control technologies. Western technology firms have developed and sold a range of digital systems to states, enabling them to monitor, track, and silence their populations with unprecedented precision. These include spyware, malware, like Pegasus, created by Israel's NSO group, is capable of infiltrating smartphones, extracting messages, recording calls, and activating cameras and microphones without the user's knowledge. Pegasus has been implicated in the targeting of journalists, human rights defenders, and political opponents in countries across the globe. Facial recognition technology. Chinese companies, including SenseTime and Megvii, have exported facial recognition systems to authoritarian regimes. In the Xinjiang region, these technologies are part of an extensive surveillance apparatus used to monitor and control the Uyghur population, contributing to mass detentions and severe human rights abuses. Mobile phone tracking and location data. Governments use telecom data and GPS tracking to monitor the movements of protesters and dissidents in real time, often coordinating arrests or intimidation campaigns. Predictive policing algorithms. Some regimes employ AI-driven platforms that analyze social media, phone records, and other data sources to predict and preempt acts of dissent. These tools criminalize political activism before it even occurs, intensifying repression through digital foresight. This fusion of physical and digital repression creates a near-total control system in many countries. Tools once limited to direct physical coercion are now integrated with technologies that invade privacy, undermine anonymity, and facilitate psychological terror. The digital dimension of the torture economy is less visible but equally insidious, expanding the reach of authoritarianism under the guise of innovation and security. Chapter 7. Legal frameworks, treaties, loopholes, and gray areas. Legal instruments, such as the United Nations Convention Against Torture, UNCAT, and regional frameworks like the European Union's anti-torture regulation, provide formal prohibitions on the manufacture, export, and use of torture devices. However, these frameworks suffer from significant enforcement challenges. Countries frequently exploit loopholes by reclassifying weapons and devices under benign or technical terms such as security equipment, law enforcement tools, or non-lethal weapons to sidestep explicit bans. This semantic evasion is compounded by the widespread practice of routing shipments through third-party nations or jurisdictions with lax export controls. Such transshipment obscures the origin and destination of sensitive goods, making regulatory oversight nearly impossible. Moreover, many countries lack stringent end-user certification processes or fail to monitor compliance once equipment has been exported. In some cases, end-user certificates are forged or misused, allowing torture devices to enter markets where their use violates international human rights standards. The combined effect of these legal gray areas is a regulatory system that is more symbolic than effective. Despite the existence of treaties and national laws, the trade in cruelty tools continues largely unchecked, protected by a complex web of diplomatic immunity, commercial confidentiality, and bureaucratic inertia. Chapter 8. Exposing the network. Whistleblowers and watchdogs. The hidden global supply chain of torture tools has only come to light thanks to the bravery of whistleblowers and the relentless work of independent watchdog organizations. Insiders such as customs officers, manufacturing employees, and government contractors have risked their careers and personal safety to leak confidential documents exposing illegal exports, fraudulent paperwork, and direct transactions with authoritarian regimes known for human rights abuses. NGOs like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the Omega Research Foundation have painstakingly pieced together these leaks to map out the complex international networks involved in the manufacture and sale of torture devices. Their reports identify specific companies, intermediaries, and government actors complicit in facilitating this trade. Despite their crucial role, whistleblowers face severe retaliation, including job loss, legal harassment, threats, and exile. Similarly, watchdog organizations often encounter political pressure, funding cuts, or disinformation campaigns aimed at discrediting their work. Yet their continued persistence ensures that the trade in cruelty tools remains under scrutiny, helping to apply pressure for reform and accountability. Chapter 9. Survivors and Consequences. The human cost, toll of the international trade in torture tools is measured not only in shipments and profits, but in the profound suffering of victims. Consider the political prisoner in Egypt who endured hours of electric shock with a stun gun, leaving lasting physical and psychological scars. Or the Chilean protester who suffered permanent injury after being struck by a rubber bullet designed to incapacitate but instead maimed. A Saudi journalist targeted with spyware was later abducted and tortured in secret detention centers, their every move tracked by invasive digital tools sold by Western companies. These stories are emblematic of thousands of similar cases worldwide. Survivors often endure long-term physical disabilities, PTSD, and social stigmatization. They frequently face significant barriers in accessing justice and rehabilitation, especially in countries where the rule of law is weak or where complicity in torture runs deep. The human cost underscores the urgency of addressing not just the trade itself, but the broader systems of impunity and neglect that allow such abuses to continue. Chapter 10. The Path Forward. Reform, Accountability, and Resistance. Ending the secret economy of torture tools requires comprehensive and coordinated action across multiple fronts. Legal reform, expanding the definitions of torture instruments within international and national laws to explicitly include emerging digital technologies alongside physical devices. Transparency measures, establishing mandatory public databases, tracking exports and licenses related to torture equipment, enabling civil society and media to monitor and hold actors accountable. Corporate accountability, imposing strict penalties and sanctions on companies that knowingly sell to regimes with documented human rights abuses, including financial fines, trade restrictions, and criminal liability. Victim support, ensuring access to medical treatment, psychological care, legal assistance, and reparations for survivors, recognizing their rights and dignity. Civil society and media pressure, empowering whistleblowers, journalists, and activists through legal protections, funding, and international solidarity to continue exposing abuses. Ultimately, true change hinges on a global political will that prioritizes human rights over profit and demands that no economy, however, secret profits from the suffering of others. Only by shedding light on this dark market can the cycle of cruelty be broken.